Madam Mayor, you are live and recording, and all of our sounds on. Great. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everybody. This is a special council meeting for one reason, and basically it's to have our budget presented to us. But before we begin, I'd like to remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed via the Township's YouTube channel. I don't think we have people participating today via Zoom, but you never know, we might. We'll get started by calling the roll. We have Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Report.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Present.
And of course myself, Heather Watson. And alongside me, we have our clerk, Martina Chafe. Good morning. CEO Elena Arthurs. Morning. Interim Treasurer Paul Kramer.
Morning.
Manager of Public Works Jake Condon.
Morning.
Fire Chief Pedersen. Librarian CEO Maggie
Pearson.
Pearson. Thank you. And we've got Gijo just saying. So with all of council in attendance, I'll call the meeting to order. As mentioned, the only purpose for today's meeting really is to receive the draft budget and hear presentations from management on part one. Part two will happen tomorrow in the chambers at 2 o'clock. Of course, today it's really about listening. I invite questions of staff as long as we're just getting clarification about the projects that are on the budget. And some light discussion, but we will hold debate and further discussion until our working session, which is scheduled for November 14th. So if you have any questions after today and tomorrow's deliberations, I would encourage you to get those questions to staff in advance of November 14th, so that they can be prepared and perhaps share that information with council in preparation for that. Moving onwards with the land acknowledgement, we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Michi, Sagig, and Ishebag. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Hearing, seeing nothing, could I get an adoption of today's agenda? Councillor Report, seconded by Councillor Johnston, all in favor? And that carries. And with that, Mr. Kramer, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council, for gathering this morning on a nice Halloween chilly day. As you can kind of see by the document in front of you, there was a lot of work put into this document and into the budget in general. And so I do want to thank all the managers who, gave me all the information needed and worked with me to get this budget in front of you. Also want to thank Gijo, my financial analyst, who's here with us today. It's kind of one of my first years that I've had an extra set of eyes and an extra set of hands, so it was quite helpful throughout the process. So we can move on to the next slide. I'm just going to go a little bit over how today's going to look and what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start off and do a lot of the talking at the beginning, give a little bit of the story about the budget, and just talk about the background, give really high overview of where we are sitting in terms of the impact of the levy. And I have a little table and summary that summarizes all the key operating changes. And from there, just a little bit of a discussion on, I think, one of the key projects in the township that's planned and moving ahead is the joint public works and fire hall building. From there, I'll hand it off to each manager to present their own budget. Each manager is going to give an overview of what the department is responsible for. I know many councillors here today are familiar and know what each department does, but I think it's always important to remember, when we're talking about budget, a lot of times we're talking about the changes, and that's representing 2% of the budget. I always say, you know, it's important to remember the other 98% that we are here and that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And then I also think it's important to look back and talk about some of the accomplishments that each department has been able to achieve in the current year. And I think that's important because when we talk about budget, you know, this does lead to tangible things in the community. And it's important to remember and recognize the things that last year's budget was able to achieve. Each manager will give a fairly high level, but I think a succinct but effective overview of the operating changes to their operating budget, and then go through each one of their capital projects. So today we're going to start with corporate services, and then we will move on to libraries. So maybe you can get out of here in a timely fashion. And from there, I believe it is public works, and then we will end today with fire services. That leaves tomorrow. Then we will have we start with parks and recreation, and then planning, and then building. So a little bit of a heavier agenda for the services that are in front of you in terms of volume, but you know, I guess we're fresh on day one, so that makes sense. So we can move on to the next slide. So we're gonna ask you to go one more.
Yep.
There we go.
Sorry, our system is very slow with the
That's
internet.
okay.
Just have to
Yeah.
wait for it to catch up with us.
I think it's important whenever I want to tell the story of the budget today and you know, where we're at, how we got here. And so it is important to look back kind of and look at the current economic state. You know, when we think of 2023, actually, I was thinking about it this morning, that this is my first budget presentation that I've done in person, even though it's my fourth. And so, you know, I think it is a sign that this was our first full year coming out of COVID without any lockdowns. And this is our kind of, you know, quote unquote return to normalcy. However, some of the remnants and effects of COVID are still being felt from an economic perspective. You know, I think supply chains are still recovering, and we're still in a fairly high inflation period. Those two things have contributed to higher interest costs, which, given our previously approved joint building project and the expected construction moving forward next year, that will be really important to monitor going forward, as it will have a large impact on the township. We don't know where things are going to go when we look forward to 2024 from an economic perspective. A lot of analysts are expecting, you know, rates to not go any higher, but we just, you know, these are all forecasts and predictions that can change tomorrow. There is an expectation that rates will start to come down middle of next year. Again, I think fingers crossed from our perspective, from a you know, hopefully when we go to actually debenture the project, that the rates do come down from where they are today. So when I look at this budget, I think about the story and really what's going on and what's gone on the past few years. And I look back on the last few budgets that I've been a part of. I think there's been a lot of work done from the management team on modernizing our services. And I think we've seen that in the past budgets and the changes that we've made to our departments. I think a lot of the changes that have been made have been recommendations from the service delivery review that was completed in 2020. And I think we've gotten through, you know, I think there's still some we're continuing to work on, but we have gotten through a lot of those recommendations. And so to me, what that means is this budget is really now a reflection from an operating perspective of kind of status quo. You know, we do see an increase, but I think that's given the higher inflation, really a lot of the increases are mainly just due to price changes. There's not many changes to kind of accommodate changes to how we operate. It's really the majority of changes are just due to pricing changes. And so we will see on the next couple of slides that we are presenting the budget at 3.8%, which is what the last inflationary numbers came out at from September to September for CPI. And now recognizing though, there is another 3.55% or 3.6% being added on to that in order to finance and fund the joint building project. So, the outside of that project, we have presented the budget at inflation, recognizing though that there is a significant financial need and commitment needed for the joint building. We can move on to the next slide. So the process, I have the meeting schedule listed here, but the process starts much earlier than this. This is kind of the process where I guess council starts to come into the conversation, but we sent out templates end of August, and it's been kind of a nonstop and nonstop conversations within finance and with the managers since then. So today and tomorrow you are receiving the presentations on the first draft, and you're hearing what's contained in that draft as of today. I can kind of touch on next steps as related to the first draft is, the information was almost changing up to the last hour of me publishing this document. And so, well, that's one of the challenges of moving up the approval and adoption date within December. And so presenting it end of October and providing it to you last week, there's still figures that we're receiving and that are changing. So if any of the numbers just change based on us receiving new information, we will amend the budget and summarize those changes going forward. And so, that is fully possible of happening, especially when we look at CPI and when we finally get those next numbers in November for October. I was looking, I think they typically come out middle of the month. I think the last numbers came out on October 17th. And so, that will play a role in some of the assumptions and some of the figures in the document. So as Mayor Watson outlined, I think today is a really good opportunity for us to all kind of make sure we have a good understanding around this. Everyone in this room has the same understanding of what's being presented. If there are clarification questions about a project, about information, I think we're fully ready and able to answer those questions. But we do have a working session scheduled, which is new to the process this year, and I think reflects some of the feedback that we received from the process last year. And that's where I think we can really dive into and have some conversations about anything that's in front of you today. From there, we're going to bring essentially what is in this first draft to a public meeting. We're going to hold it at a council meeting, and the presentation will look a little bit different. It'll be a little bit more summarized, obviously. But at that meeting, we will, any input that the public has on what's being presented, we'll receive and we'll summarize in order to bring it forward for the council budget deliberation at December 5th. So at that time, I would hope by December 5th, we have much more final numbers. Anything that's changed in terms of new information will be included, and we'll be able to have what the public has provided in terms of input at that meeting. A couple of just other items that are continuing to be worked on as part of this process. Part of the budget last year was to request a community grant policy. I came to council in the summer just asking for some input. There has been some progress made, and that will be presented at an upcoming meeting. And we're going to continue to work on the asset management plan and hopefully finalize that in the next upcoming little while. And I also want to include as part of that asset management plan a more robust reserve policy. I think those two things will kind of guide and help with some longer term thought and budgeting kind of philosophies going forward. Move to the next slide. Okay, so there's I think 75 pages in this document, but I think the majority of people will usually look for this page and come here. This is really summarizing at the highest level the budget changes, and then from here we'll dive and get a little deeper and deeper. So operating, we see a 3.1% increase, which is a 2.4% tax impact. We have an 11% increase on capital, which actually I think is pretty reflective of when we look at the construction price index and how that has been quite a bit higher than traditional CPI, and the cost of doing any sort of construction or purchasing vehicles, which make up a large part of our capital budget, has gone up more than the 3.8% mentioned earlier. So I think this story reflects reality in terms of what we're seeing in terms of price increases. So as mentioned, we do end up with a 3.8% tax increase. We have the capital levy for the joint building, which is 3.6% this year, for a total increase of 7.4%. What that means to the average household, when we look at the residential impact per 100,000 of assessment, that would be $32 a year and $2.68 a month. And the median property is still currently at 256,000, and so that would be an annual change of $82 and a monthly change of just under $7. When we talk about the median property, I just want to make a quick note on that these are still going to be based on 2016 assessment values, given that MPAC has not completed a reassessment. So, anyone in the community who says, well, my house is worth a lot more than 256,000, this doesn't reflect me, they have to look at what their actual assessment is to see kind of how they would compare to that median property. I would think values have probably more than doubled. And so if you're trying to think about what you could sell your house for, and you're saying that you aren't close to that median, I think you actually may be surprised that you're probably closer to it than you think, because your assessment value hasn't changed. Next slide, please. So now we kind of go that next level deeper into the summary of the changes. When we look at the salary wage cost of living adjustment, that represents an impact of 1.8% to the levy. As per the compensation agreement with staff, the cost of living adjustment is tied to the increase or the change that OMERS applies. And in high inflationary periods, that represents a higher increase. However, in low inflation periods, it does represent, sometimes it could be lower than a standard agreed upon rate. Again, insurance continues to be a challenge, not only for us, for all municipalities across the province and probably in the country. So we're continuing to see substantial increases to our insurance. This year, we will see another 15% added, and that represents a 0.5% increase to our levy. When we talk about inflation, fuel costs have continued to rise. We did increase the 2023 budget, but based on some actuals that we're seeing, I think additional increases are required. The one benefit that we see is from higher interest rates is we are earning at a higher rate as well. And so we've been able to earn quite a bit more on our reserves and our investments over the past year. And we expect to continue to do so going forward. And so we've been able to bump our interest earnings by about 67,000. And again, this is a little bit conservative just because I don't want to bump up the base too much, considering we don't know where interest rates are going to stay. Next slide. One of the changes that we have made, and we'll get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty in terms of some of the changes we've made to allocations amongst departments as we discuss each department, but I think one of the changes that is important to note here is we've created a kind of separate bylaw enforcement department or sub-department, and what that means is we're trying to capture the fact that there is time being spent specifically from the CBO and the planning and building administrator being spent on bylaw enforcement issues. The building department is supposed to reflect all costs related to the enforcement of the building code. And so these costs should not be being covered and paid for by building permits. And so we are reflecting that by removing it from the building budget and creating a separate bylaw enforcement sub-department. I think it's also important because we're continuing to have increased bylaw issues and time spent on bylaw, and we should be capturing those costs separately. The police services contract has gone up, fairly reasonable, but it does represent an 11,000 increase or 1.2% to the police services budget. However, we are budgeting, we need to, the police services board, and I think there's other staff who can speak better to this, but there will be some additional costs with the new structure and format of the police services board, specifically an administrator. And so we've allocated some costs related to that need. And then we kind of look at, all these, as we'll go through each department, there are some changes to each department, and those kind of add up to that 40,000 number, and we'll go through those more in detail. The last change that I'm just going to touch on is the reserve level, the reserve contribution decrease for the gravel pit licensing and purchasing reserves. These are tied, these contributions were set up in the 2020 budget, potentially 2019, I'm trying to think back, but I believe it's 2020. And the idea was that any gravel being used and applied to the roads, we would put money aside into the reserves for the gravel pit. And so really these figures are based on the projected use and amount of gravel that we're forecasting to be used in the capital budget. And so there is a direct correlation there. And so there's less gravel just as part of the list of capital projects being forecasted for 2024, and therefore the contribution to that reserve has decreased. Next slide, please. Last slide before I hand it over. I think we're all aware of the joint public works and fire hall building that is being planned and planned to be constructed kind of as soon as the process enables us to. So the summary there shown is what was approved in order to get us up to the needed debenture payment of about 915,000. And so we're gradually adding to the levy each year. And so this was the numbers that were included in the 2023 budget. And so that's what's being reflected in 2024. There are some assumptions here that we haven't necessarily accounted for in terms of changes. The current strategy shown is based on, and the cost of the debt payment is assumed to be 4.4%. The current rate is 5.39, so even the debt payment shown would be higher than what we're forecasting. I think that's where I get back into really monitoring and paying attention and trying to be strategic around when we debt finance this project going forward, and potentially being able to capture some lower rates if they begin to decrease middle of next year. What we can look at and consider for this project is doing some construction financing, and that'll bridge us until we actually have to lock in and commit to the long-term debenture. So it is going to be something that we continue to monitor. We have been and will continue to monitor and come up with a strategic plan in order to not commit to higher rates. And so hopefully, that 4.4% is a safe assumption, and we get back to this number, but it's something we will continue to report on and to council going forward. Okay, so in terms of the departmental summaries, we do have an organizational chart just for reference here. I think that it does provide context to what staff fall under what department and who makes up the organization. Next slide, we're going to start with corporate services. One thing I do want to touch on with corporate services, and it won't necessarily impact the numbers you see here today, but we did put a lot of work into changing the back end and the accounting of this department. So up until now and currently, we've had kind of two sub-departments for corporate services. There's been one that captures kind of everything from a corporate perspective. So that would be CAO, clerks, finance, and even any costs associated with the building. So the actual building that we operate in. In order to kind of provide some ownership of each budget, I've separated out, so the CAO has her own budget, the clerk will have her own budget, and I will have my own budget. And then we've separated all costs related to the municipal office into a separate sub-department. However, I wouldn't be able to present those in a meaningful way that shows changes between each one. There are changes, in allocations that are now different amongst those four, but I've presented all four together in order to capture and still show at a high level what the 2023 budget was and what the 2024 budget is. But once we get into 2024 and doing any financial reporting, we will be able to report on those departments separately. And with that, I will take a breather and hand it over to Elena Arthurs, our CAO.
Thank you, Paul. Just a quick overview specifically out of the CAO's office, policy and program development that generally comes from the direction of council. We've looked at some of our internal policies over the last year, assistance from the clerk's department, addressing how we conduct our business internally, but a lot of that comes from our direction from council. Human resources, we've had some human resources challenges, I would say, with recruitment and some other things. So there's been quite a bit of time in the last year that's been taken up with a variety of issues under human resources. It is something that I think with our consultant with SHRP, we pay a fairly nominal amount, and he does provide us with some good advice when we need it, but at the same time, we're relatively small. This can be managed under the CAO's office without too many challenges. The performance management, we did move that structure and changed it a little bit with our staff, and we continue to move through that and continue to try to, from my perspective, deal with the managers so that this is an annual performance and keep up on how we're doing things. I know there's been some changes since I came, so still working with the managers to sort of understand my expectation and work with council so that we can get the information to you and that they're conducting business the way that we want them to. Economic and community development. This, incorporates anything from businesses that are looking at coming into the community, looking at our land structure, dealing closely with the planning department on where, we have employment plans, where we have opportunities. Some things that were started prior to my arrival that we've sort of worked through and recognizing there may not be the same opportunities we thought. specifically with, places like Indicom Drive, but definitely working with those that are interested in coming into the community. Developing programs and bringing forward to council for approval. So that really captures anything like the tree program, anything that we think that we can do to enhance the municipality and bringing those opportunities to council, working with the appropriate department head with the appropriate costing so that council can approve those initiatives. Working with the stakeholders, elected officials, other levels of government. I think, we continue to look for funding opportunities, any opportunity that we can to leverage the provincial or the federal government is a good opportunity. They don't always come at the perfect time, but we definitely try to keep an eye on that. We have now Gijo with us as well, who's going to assist with some of that grant searching and looking at the opportunities that are there and working through some of those applications. But we definitely try to keep a pulse on what we have in the queue and what we might be able to leverage funding for. And then our strategic planning overall, which we are in the midst of our strategic plan, which I think is going to be a great process. And you will have a report coming to council next week just on where we're at and what to expect in the next couple of months. But I think we're on track and we'll have our new strategic plan in place for early 2024. We'll see some of that before we finalize the budget. So if there are amendments that we have to make or things that we want to allocate funding to, we'll be able to do that. It will be towards the end. I was saying to Paul the other day, I said, I really do like having a budget past the year prior, but I said, I don't know until last week when we were chatting if I even recognize all of the challenges that creates with the last minute changes in rates and, our revenue and our costs. So certainly that will be something that, might be towards the end of the approval, but you definitely will have a session where you'll have some sense of where we're going and where we might want to allocate money. If we do need something for 2024, and alternatively, we'll start to work through that in 2024 and plan for the 3 years following that the strategic plan will lay out. Some of the specific accomplishments in this year, we did complete the job evaluation and the pay equity plan. This was a project that actually started in 2022 with the compensation review, and I think it was important for staff. It was important to go through all of those job evaluations and make sure that people were where they should be. The pay equity plan was overdue as well, so we made sure that that was updated. So we are on top of all of that. There's no concerns. The pay equity plan is posted. There was no concerns with the plan. I don't even think I received any questions. So all of that is in place, and we shouldn't have to look at that again for some time. The recruitment of the new IT coordinator, that is working really, really well. So that position shared with Asheville Norwood. I think staff are feeling, there's definitely some bumps along the way where changes are being made and we're transitioning from some of the things that Micro H did that now Mr. Garside is handling internally. So there are some changes to our systems, but he is very responsive, and I think overall staff are feeling far more relaxed about our IT and the challenges that we have been experiencing. So as we move forward, there will be some additional changes that we're looking at, and you'll see that in the budget. But at the end of the day, we're looking to streamline our processes and looking for things that are more efficient and effective, and I think IT is one of those key places to do that. So we're really happy with the way that this has worked out, and I believe we will see some cost savings in the long run, like we are starting to experience with some of the other changes that we've made. The new software programs, that kind of ties into that. So again, we're talking about Office 365 and just certain things that I think we're a little bit behind right now that we can be brought up to speed. You'll see with the clerk's department looking at records management, again, tying into those systems. So trying to have, it felt like prior to this, we were piecemealing things a little bit and one department wanted something and, purchasing the software. So we're really trying to tie everything together, utilize the software that we have, not have duplicate software that can do the same thing and making sure that we're spending money efficiently. So it's, again, great to have Mike on board so he can evaluate all of that. The performance evaluation, I think we already spoke about, and the strategic plan. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. And this is just an off-the-wall question here, but when you say that explore funding opportunities with upper, provincial and federal, do we actually go after them when we're looking for money, or do we have to wait for a grant to come along? Like, can we petition our two MP and MPP and say, hey, we've got a big project on, we're looking for money, what can you do for us? Like, not wait for a grant. Is that something we already do, or is that something we can do?
Through you, Mayor Watson. I think it's certainly something we can do. Staff have not been proactive in doing that. I feel like that may be more at the political level for you know, the elected officials to lobby the upper levels of government. We tend to just watch what's coming and try to, there are some grants too that they'll close and then they reopen. So we try to just keep an eye on what's available and what's there and understand what they're looking for. Sometimes we're not successful and, you know, we experienced that with the strategic plan one, and I called and I said, okay, what did we need to do? And, you know, she essentially said, well, a strategic plan, although there was the word strategic planning throughout the document, a strategic plan itself was not an eligible expense. So, you know, we talked about what was an eligible expense and, you know, sort of looking forward so that we know what's coming and we can be prepared for some of that. But I think when we have large projects, I think it's something that if the elected officials are lobbying at a higher level, if something does come up, you're probably going to be made aware of it. And then that way, if it gets missed or if we don't have it yet, it's good to be on top of it. So a lot of the time, these windows are very narrow.
Any other questions from council before we move on? Moving on.
And to start next, we have Martina J. Harvick, who's going to present the clerk's department.
Very much, through you, Madam Mayor. So the clerk's department has a variety of responsibilities. Some you see on a daily basis, some are hidden in the background. One of our largest responsibilities is the preparation of council and committee agendas, minutes, correspondence, corresponding bylaws, and all of the statutory public notices that come along with that. We also act as a resource to council and committees regarding meeting management, procedural bylaw, issues surrounding accountability, transparency, and governance. We also act as the head for the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, all of the compliance regulations, we respond to requests from stakeholders for information, and we manage the records retention bylaw. In my quarterly updates to council, you'll see we always mention what type of activities going on under that category. We're also responsible for maintaining the township's policy manual and ensuring that it's up to date. I know we've brought quite a few new policies to council over the last while as we've instituted some internal policies. So that's been a busy part of our program. Alana mentioned as well, we've been working together to put some new things in place. So that's been very good. We're also responsible that under that records retention bylaw to adhere to that bylaw and then maintain all of the correspondence and related records. We have records both in paper and digitally, and as Alana had mentioned in her presentation, the digital side of those records are something that we're becoming more and more interested in and focused on. This office was primarily a paper-based office for a long time. So the transition to a digital office is quite interesting and involves extra work and new software to help us bring that forward. We're also responsible for the issuance of lottery licenses and canteen permits. The lottery licenses are a little bit new for the department. Previously, a staff member in the finance department handled lottery licenses under the purview of the clerk, but now the clerk's office is just taking care of all lottery licenses. And looking forward, we will be updating and improving our lottery license protocol to ensure that we're adhering to all the regulations of the province. For canteen permits, those are like mobile canteens, so chip trucks, barbecues, things like that. We also do special event permits, so if someone wanted to have a parade or close down a street for a block party, any type of event, that would come through our department as well. For example, we got the permits for the Santa Claus Parade, Remembrance Day. Those are some of the internal ones, but if someone, a member of the public or another institution wanted to do an activity, they would have to come to us so we can work through the process with them. And of course, something that we do every 4 years is manage the election process and all of the work before and after the election. We did have some good accomplishments in 2023. One of my favorite ones is that we were able to participate in the public policy internship program with Trent University. We thought that was a great success. Our intern was excellent, and I feel like he had a good experience as well. We have applied for 2024, and we're working with Trent to find a suitable student for that. So hopefully I'll have some updates for you at our next committee of the whole. We've also introduced the routine disclosure policy and procedure earlier this year. So instead of forcing all requests for information to go through the FOI process, which can be quite onerous for the requester and staff, we created this new policy to reduce the burden on the requester and to make information more available and to allow that information to flow without as many roadblocks because we're not having to operate within the strict confines of the FOI process. We also introduced a public conduct policy and procedure. That was a recommendation from the Ombudsman's office through a letter they had sent us. So working through that, we created this policy. It was approved by council. There were some reports to council as well. So that policy is in place. It's working well. We haven't seen any concerns with it. We also created new terms of references for the events committee and the historical committee. Sadly, the historical committee didn't have much interest, so we haven't been able to enact those new terms of reference, but should there be interest in restarting that, we have something ready to go, so we can just hit the ground running. We also made amendments to the procedural bylaw, which is quite recent, which is the introduction of the new public comment period and changing the dates of publishing of the agenda. So that public comment period is 5 minutes that people are able to sign up for, and we've done that twice now. Seems to be going well, and we'll do it again next week. So, and also we changed the date of the publishing of the agenda for the public. So both council and the public get their agendas on Thursdays to allow more time for the public to read those agendas and then also get their request for the public comment period in on Monday. And finally, we've also gone through the process to issue marriage licenses and perform civil marriage services. So we now have permission from the province to complete that. We have all the paperwork required, the licenses, the registry books, and everything else. We've taken training, and now we're putting together internal policies and procedures so that we can do that. And we have done one ceremony so far. So it's pretty exciting. Anyone has any questions?
Just one, if I may, please, through you, Madam Mayor. And because I get asked this occasionally, canteen permits, if, say, next door to me is going to have it's a farm, they're gonna have a sale, and then people bring a mobile canteen just for that day, they do need a license for that day for the canteen, or
They
is this?
should probably, through you, Madam Mayor, they should probably reach out to me so we can just discuss it. Depending on the circumstances, they may need a permit, but I look at each one individually and then review that against our policy and our bylaw, and then help that person with whatever steps they need to accomplish.
And it's usually just our, you know, our local 4 or 5 kind of in this Peterborough County area auctioneers and stuff like that, but you do see one once in a while, who say, oh, they have a permit for that, they don't know, so maybe that's something that we could be proactive on too in the future, and like the big ones around here, so like I just send them a notification that, you know, if you're gonna have a canteen, please call the township and discuss it, you know, we can be proactive on it, and there's no questions afterwards, or if someone has an incident, which you never know, I'm sure we'd be named in it, whatever, because we didn't follow the right steps, so. All right, that's good, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are provisions in our mobile canteen bylaw that exempt quite a few different organizations from canteen regulations, so if we can provide that information on our website to make that clear to the public about who needs what.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Before we move on, Mr. Treasurer, are we we're doing these departmental overviews right now. Are we looking to get clarity on the projects, or are we going to go back to the respective presenters and go over the capital? Are we following this by the page, or are we jumping back and forth, I guess?
Through Mayor, so we are going kind of page by page. So, and I think just, it's probably better if you do have a clarification question for that manager to ask when they're done presenting. Because, you know, after I speak on finance and wrap up corporate services, Maggie's going to present for the library, and then when she's done, she could then part ways with us.
Right. So similarly on the clerk's department, we're looking for questions on potentially.
So I'm gonna come back to I'm gonna present the actual kind of budget side here.
Okay.
And then if there's questions on those projects, you know, we're all still gonna be here.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure we were going in the anticipated order. All right, we're good, guys. Moving on. Thank you.
So for the finance department, we are responsible for all financial reporting and record keeping. Part of that is actually including our tangible capital assets register and implementing the asset management plan under PSAB legislation. As we're doing today, we create the budget and we also monitor it throughout the year. standard kind of finance processes, which include accounts payable and receivable, payroll, and all the related benefits. We do manage the grant process from submission to reporting. We do our annual audit in partnership with Baker Tilly, and we manage and conduct all aspects of tax collection, including tax sales. So, some of the things that we accomplished in 2023, we actually did implement, sometimes it's nice to list your accomplishments and what we were able to achieve. And we did implement a corporate-wide time management system, which I think has been helpful for everyone in the organization, but especially in payroll and in finance, which has really expedited our payroll process every 2 weeks. We implemented a new project costing module, which kind of goes hand in hand with that HR module. This allows all, for example, all of the public works staff, they track their time within that system and we allocate it to each project and each task that they're doing. So we do have a breakdown of where everyone is spending their time. Included in that system is also allocating which machine they used and allocating that machine to each project, and that's part of our capitalization process. So it relates back to our TCA. All of that was done pretty manually in Excel. I think you could ask Jake beside me before, to save time on that, I think is saving him quite a bit of time as well. We did have a retirement this year, and we lost a lot of knowledge and experience went out the door. But kind of as part of that, we did realign some duties and responsibilities amongst the team, and we did hire a junior financial analyst. The other system that we implemented, which we are still kind of working our way through, but I think it's working pretty effectively, is the bids and tender system, which allows for vendors to submit their responses to our RFPs electronically. It also allows us to communicate with them, and at any point in the process, I think it's much more effective from that perspective. I'm sure there's going to be some people who have some challenges in changing and adopting new technology, but we did decide last year during the budget process to take the funding model where no vendors need to pay in order to submit a bid, and so we are bearing the cost as a township. And so it's just learning the process, and hopefully, as we do more and we, time goes on, we aren't the only organization using this system, so hopefully more vendors in the local community get used to it and we can support them through it. So we can move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry.
Just through you, Madam Mayor. Just on that, Paul, I've had a couple of questions from local people or local contractors. Is there any way that if they have an issue with that, they would be able to get some help to put a bid in through that system?
Yep, through you, Madam Mayor, for sure. I think our goal is to help and to make sure we get good bids in turn. So, we want to make sure we're getting the information we need in order to assess the bid. So we are working on getting a guide. There is a guide within the system, but we're also working on getting a kind of a walkthrough for local residents. We're working with the bids and tenders software company to get a link on our website that would actually walk them through how to do it.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll pass that on.
We can go to the next slide. We'll allow for questions. Anything to do with me, we'll come back. So just in this slide, what you see is the council budget. What you'll see going forward for each department is there are notes where there's been major changes to the operating budget. And there is going down the side in terms of percent change, there is a large change to the insurance, really what that is there's been changes to some of the allocations amongst the insurance and amongst to each department. So we see a large increase there, but overall, as I discussed earlier, it did go up 15% overall, which is some of the allocations, and we'll see that with library as well, have changed just based on some of the information we've received and the way that we've refined some of the information that we've provided to our insurance provider. So this is the corporate services. So this captures CAO's office, clerk's office, or clerk's services. I'm not sure what the exact title is, both work, I guess, and finance, and also the municipal office and town hall. So there's a lot kind of captured within this sheet, but just to touch on some of the changes. So I think one of the big changes is we see, a little bit less than cost of living in the employee wages and benefits, which is due to the fact that we did remove salary and wages expense related to the custodian, which was in the previous budget. And we've moved that to contracted services as we are now contracting out that service and no longer doing it with internal staff. Some of the building maintenance and repairs. So we have been able to reduce there. I think some of the costs that have been due to or related to the building have been captured more on the capital side and less on the operating side. And that's where we can reduce kind of the building maintenance and repairs shown here on the operating side. When we look at, I'm just seeing what else is worth mentioning. We are budgeting for new township and cemetery signs, which are quite faded and we are receiving complaints. There is an increase to the professional development memberships. This is really, when we're looking at the current needs of our staff and having added some professional staff along the way who are a part of certain organizations and membership costs. For example, we now have someone professionally trained on the payroll side, and there are costs associated with that. And so the increase is really just to reflect what the current need of our staff complement is. So we can move on to capital, or sorry, the next page, and I'll see if there's anything here. So this is where on the interest side, we actually see the additional revenue being earned from the higher interest rates. And I think at that point, we can move on to capital. So IT, I guess, falls under the CAO, but I'm confident that I can speak to this project. The way that, in working with Mr. Garside, our new IT staff member coordinator, he had a list of kind of projects that were needed and are just kind of due to standard hardware replacements. We had some laptops being scheduled for next year, but we started to look at what was going to be needed on kind of a year-to-year basis, and we didn't have anything over the last few years. Kind of a standard contribution for IT replacements as it relates to computers, monitors, printers, any kind of major IT need that we have in the office here and outside of the office for the other departments. But so our strategy is, we added up kind of what was needed next year when we included a server replacement, some other laptop replacements. It was totaling about 20,000. And then we looked at what was the next year, because we only had about 2 laptops next year. So when we looked at 2025, we were going to have, a list of laptops that were going to be needed. We started to go through the needs, and I think we were able to estimate at this point in time that we will have approximately 20,000 each year needed in IT needs for the hardware and ongoing replacement need. And so it's recommended that we put this amount in on kind of an annual basis. There may be years where we have less, but what we can do is establish, and what's being recommended, we'll establish an IT reserve. And for any years where we are less than that, we will put that into a reserve to account for any years where we may actually need more and have any kind of more expensive needs as it relates to IT. So project number 2 that falls under corporate, so office chairs replacement. I think we're predicting or forecasting about 20 chairs that need to be replaced, and when you look at and price out office chairs that people sit in all day and every day, and I think they are critical for, you know, when we talk about ergonomics and the health and safety long-term of our staff, it's important that we have good quality chairs. Now, some of the volume is when we actually, I think council can look down at their chairs here, and they're peeling and they are quite old, similar to our boardroom upstairs. And so when we kind of went around the office, including these chairs, we're at about 20 chairs that need to be replaced at about $300 to $350 a piece. The storage room exterior door, the current storage room exterior door showing signs of wear. And I guess, you know, you start to have concerns around safety and the integrity of what's being stored in there. So the plan is to replace the existing door with a more robust and secure solution. And as per, I believe it was the last council meeting, there was direction provided to include $10,000. I know it's not capital per se, but it's a project. And so we've included it under capital to highlight it. And so this is the tree replacement program, and which the details were provided at the last meeting, and so another 10,000 for the 2024 year. So at that point, I'll open it up for any questions as it relates to corporate.
Thank you. Council, any questions on the proposed projects? For clarification, Councilor Watt?
Me, please, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Well, the tree replacement's $10,000, so that's a kind of a fund that we have like that. What is where would the fund that we have, I'll call it a slush fund, whatever, you know, how Stony Lake, people come to us every year and they want money to do the water testing, so we got the Lions Club has asked us, you know, to where does that fund come into effect? Is it under kind of this, or would it be under more operating?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So under the council budget in that table, one of the actually changes this year is I did try and provide a little bit more detail in the operating tables for council, so it was a little bit more meaningful in terms of the breakdown. You know, and so for council, you'll see in that budget, there's a community grants line item. And that's where those types of the requests, as you mentioned in terms of your Lions Club, that's where those funds come from, the 3,900 there. So this would be separate and additional to that 3,900.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, because I mean, hit and miss, that's depending on what we get asked for, that's gonna be kind of iffy. I'd like to, even if it's a reserve, I myself would like to see there be enough funds in that if we do get an oddball request here and there, that we're not scrambling for where it comes from, like maybe bump up, you said it's 39, maybe bump up to 5,000 or something like that, or whatever. I mean, that's just a suggestion, it's council's decision, of course, but I mean, I'd like to see that fund up a little bit, just in case, because I know we have had requests here and there for different things, or someone's going away on a township resident's got something really important, like you know, that's going to benefit the vision of the township, and like that, and they're going to represent us. I know we have had those requests before. I can't remember whether we ever gave anything, but I'd like to see that fund enough that, you know, if we don't spend it, we don't spend it, but at least if it's there, we're not scrambling for somewhere else to get it.
So I think what I can say to that is, you know, this probably the types of details we work through when I do get the community grant program back to council. I think those are all very good points, and if anything, that additional information is I can take as I finalize it.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just a question on the tree replacement program. But was there funds left over from that grant that we actually got from, no,
So that's where you got there, no. So they were for very specific things that we applied for, and it does, we're trying to figure out a couple things, but you know, the information right now is that that program was for this calendar year, and those funds need to be used kind of by the end of the provincial year, which is by March.
Any other questions from council? I'll jump in and just ask one, on the operating side, Paul, sorry, I have it in front of me, I've lost it now. Advertising and special events, I see that there's been a reduction in that budget, substantial reduction by about 64%. It looks, I'm assuming it's just right sizing based on what's been spent historically.
Yeah, I will investigate. I believe that's what it is. But yeah, we probably should have had a note there to explain that bigger change. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions from council on the corporate budget? Seeing nothing further, I think we're on to library services.
So we'll have Maggie Pearson come up, and you may want to just do it from the podium just so the mic can pick you up.
Okay. Thank you. First slide, okay. All right, thank you. I'll go over this briefly. It hasn't changed much since last year. Library services are responsible for access for the community to all of our collections. Those come in all different formats for all of our different reader groups, from children to seniors. We have a large collection of electronic resources, ebooks, audiobooks. That's something that we've been promoting a lot this year, especially since we got new ones this year, which include movies, series, shows on demand, as well as consumer health information. So that's something we've been promoting. Periodicals, access to accessible formats like Daisy readers and audiobooks on CDs. And then of course there's the local history archives. And then on the programs and services side, we deliver programming to, again, all of our different age groups. Those include story time, class visits, computer literacy classes, language classes, and many more. Research, reference, and readers advisory. Wi-Fi and internet access. Our Wi-Fi is faster now, not by much, but a little. And then we maintain a safe meeting place for people in our community. I just want to speak a little bit to that. There are a lot of social service agencies in Peterborough who have a rural outreach mandate, and usually the first place they think of to get in touch with when they are acting on that is or other rural public librarians. So we have seen an increase in our delivering of services and programs through other groups in Peterborough who are trying to get out into rural communities. And then there's the local art gallery, which is housed in the library. Some of our accomplishments for 2023. We've been working on a policy review with the board. That hadn't been done in, I would say, 4 to 6 years. We're more than halfway through, so that's very positive. We'll continue into next year. We secured 2 grants, one for the summer experience program, so we were able to get a summer student to deliver summer programming, and then we're still working on delivering programming through the seniors community grant. We recruited and onboarded 2 new staff, including our permanent library assistant. and she has made a huge difference to our capacity at the library. She's an MLIS with over 10 years library experience, so that's been really positive for the community. Developed and executed 20 standalone events, as well as 14 regular weekly or bi-weekly programs. So in the middle of 2022, last year when I started, we had one monthly program running. And I just ran like a few numbers last night. From January to September, we've doubled our program attendance this year compared to the entire year last year. So we've seen a huge increase in people coming into the library, accessing the programs that we're delivering. And again, just sort of back to that community partnership building, we have had community caring, Peterborough Public Health, partnering with all the rural public libraries in the county to offer, among other things, we're expanding our library of things, so we're offering CO2 monitors now for loan. And then our capital projects for 2023 were the water filtration system, audio replacement, and paint drywall repairs. So if anyone hasn't been into the library in the last 8 months, it looks very different. It looks really good. Next slide. Okay, so this is our operating, and just to sort of echo what Paul said earlier, this is very much a status quo budget. No changes have been made by the board except where there have been cost increases. So they're not requesting any increase in staff hours. The increase in that line is due to cost of living adjustment, and then if you refer to the, I think it was in June or July, the pay equity review reviewed the CEO pay band as one above what it sits at. Insurance, again, I would just echo what Paul said about that increase. And the hydro increase is being investigated by, well, I guess there has been an increase in usage and we're not sure why. So we're going to take a look at the last 6 months or 12 months of hydro usage to see where those might have occurred. But otherwise, that's why that's there. And then I don't know if there's anything on the next page for operating. No, capital. Sorry for capital. So it's also, the first one remains the same as it always does. Those are new books for the library collection and expanded collections management. The flooring project, since renovating the nonfiction section of the library, painting and moving furniture around, the flooring has become more exposed and there are parts that are just that end of life. The children's fiction section was refloored 5 or 6 years ago, so continuing that through the library is a goal of the board. And then signage, we were able to replace our faded Douro-Dummer sign with one that we found in the basement, so that's positive. We would like to put channel letters on the building because it currently says Township of Douro-Dummer. And that's it for capital projects.
I can just add a little information to the capital for library. In 2023, an agreement was finalized between the library board and the township in order to establish who does what, who's responsible for what. And one of the things as part of that agreement is the actual maintenance of the building is being completed by the township. And so the kind of the cutoff point, what we said is projects over 5,000, which are then deemed to be capital, are being funded from the township. And we do have a, based on some previous reserves that the library had, we do have some reserves there able to fund these types of projects. The reserves in that reserve fund are from previous library surpluses. And so the flooring would be funded from the township, the capital portion of those reserve funds. And then what we did is establish an operating reserve for the library as well to handle, if anything kind of goes over in a given year, a little bit over budget, for example, like hydro, or there's one-off projects throughout the year, or like this signage that the library wants to undertake. And so that signage expense is being funded through the library's operating expense or reserve, which they are managing.
Thank you for that clarification.
To
Council
the
Johnson.
chair, where it says on that revenue, the grants, is that the actual grant that we got last year? 573,000? That's the figure we actually got from the,
Can you clarify what line you're looking at?
oh,
Are we on the budget for
right at
the
the very
library?
bottom, right at the very bottom where it says revenues. Expenses and then revenues.
Are you on the right,
And then-
what page number are you on, Councilor?
Well, it's still in there, the answer from them, you should know that.
I wonder.
This is the school board. Oh, grand total, 145,000. So my question is that you got down this coming year, it'd be up to 155,000 for the grant. Are they increasing so much a percentage every year? Because I know years ago, they used to be kind of pretty consistent.
Just to clarify, I think we're looking at the grand total. So that's the grand
Oh,
total
that's the, okay.
for the library service
Okay.
as a whole,
That's your grand total.
which is, so that is what is changing. So it's changing from
No, that's.
145 grand total after any revenues, grants, everything. And then the budget for 2024 is at 155,000.
Okay, anyway, getting back to my question, now it says, revenue on that. Do we still get a grant for the library?
Yep, through your Madam, yes, we do, and that's what actually funds the materials. So we get about 14,000, and so the books and materials amount is directly correlated to that grant.
So that's a pretty consistent number every year?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Other questions, Councilor Watt?
Actually, through library and, through Paul's before that, signage. And I know it came up with our previous council, and I can't remember the name, was it
Wayfinding?
wayfinding? Is that still something we're involved in, or is that something that, I know they were trying to get that, we did put money in towards it, I believe, township, or we talked about it, but is that something we're still involved in, or is that something that we need to look at when we're looking at all the sign replacements, stuff like that, or is that kind of off the table?
Who wants to handle that?
Madam Clerk, yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. There had been a county-wide wayfinding project through PCAD, and they had wanted to apply for funding through the RED program, which is the Rural Economic Development grant program. And so we had set money aside to contribute to that, because there was a certain contribution that each community had to make if the grant was received. The grant was not received. And so we never ended up having to make that contribution. So those funds just went back into the general funds to be dispersed as per the budget.
So we're on the home for signs, like whatever we decide we want, that's what we go with.
That's correct.
Perfect.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, if I can just add to that. I know there are a lot of the signs in the community that are fading and these signs that were done initially, and there's been lots of talk about replacing those signs. And part of the discussion, I think, even that we've had to date with the strategic plan is, branding. What do we want to look like? Is this what we still want to continue with? So we've held off doing any kind of replacement. I know when Maggie asked me about the signs, we'll just wait. So once we get through that, that might be something that comes from there. And there has been some tourism type funding out there, so we'll keep an eye on that too. Coming out of COVID, there was a little bit that we saw here and there. So that might be a good initiative if we make a decision to make changes.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So that would actually be, really, the signage would be actually capital for the township, right? For under the signing, that would not be costing, coming out of the library's budget, right? Or it's for the library, but it's actually would be, is that correct? Am I reading?
So I think if we were, through Madam Mayor, I think if we were to look at that project as a whole, and we look at wayfinding, it's probably from an economic development and kind of community development kind of perspective, and that's likely where it would fall under. Because I think we'd be looking at it from a community kind of
Yeah,
perspective, not just for the library.
right. Okay, thank you. I think I'm a question got answered.
Okay, any other questions from council? I was kind of looking at you and down, casting my eye down the bench to see if there were any other hands that went up.
Through you, Mayor Watson, if I can just recap, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. It sounds like on signage front things, yes, we need signage. And B, we're going to wait till the strategic plan's done, so we have a better picture on what we want the township's image to look like, and then kind of take all of our old faded signs and replace all of them at the same time. Probably one tender for the whole thing, then try to get the best price possible.
Through Madam Mayor, ideally, that's a broad initiative and maybe not something we're gonna be able to do right away, but definitely the signs were all done at once, so they are all, quite similar. So if we're going to do it, it will have to be all at once, and we'll try to replace them with something that's more updated. The alternative is we come out of the strategic plan, if everybody's happy with the way they are, we'll replace the ones as required.
And if I can just add, it sounds like departmentally, be it the library or otherwise, everybody's aware that this is potentially happening. So should the budget pass with signage allowed, they're not going to run out and replace signs tomorrow. They're going to wait until the strategic plan is finalized and see what comes of that. Yes, great, thank you. Any other questions from council? I've got a couple, Maggie, if you will. I noticed on your operating budget, infractions, it's a silly thing. It's got like a revenue of $408 last year and this projected. Did I not recall, or do I not recall the library kind of gave way or abolished the policy around infractions? And is it really a line worth having in the budget at all?
That's right, thank you. That number, we did abolish fines. We are fine free. It's become more standard across libraries in Ontario. Those infractions are actually replacement fees for lost and damaged books.
Right.
So whether or not those infractions go back into the materials budget or somewhere else is a good question.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing, hearing that Councilor Johnson had mentioned earlier, the grant that comes in that covers books and material,
Yeah.
$14,000 plus or minus, which has remained pretty flat for a good decade, if I can remember back then. Are we using these for physical books? Like, are there any rules around how those funds are being applied? Because I also know from time spent on the library board myself, it seems like a revolving door where like there's such little space that books are being, bought, shelved, and then a year later pulled off and replaced with brand new books, and it's almost a waste of those tax dollars kind of flowing through. So how are those materials being, how are those funds being spent?
That is another good question. So first I would say that I can sort of, the budget that we give to our book vendor every year, I do have the leeway to manage so that we don't go in hoping to spend the $14,000 on physical books, because you are right, we do have limited space. To speak to the question of weeding, I would not say that we weed new books a year after we get them. The collection has been growing organically in the community since I think the 70s or 80s. So there are very, very old books that we are still reading first. So to answer your question, I think that it would probably be prudent to use some of that $14,000 for our licensing, which includes ebooks, just because those don't take space. And then we are also working to create space where we can and obtain space where and when we can.
Sure, yeah, no, and I agree, like, you know, I see how the space has evolved in the last
Yeah.
couple of years to create more space, which is fantastic. So, but what I'm hearing between the lines is that the funding that we receive doesn't have to be used exclusively for physical books.
Yeah,
It could be for e-resources
It
and
could.
other
Yeah, it
online
could.
resources.
Especially when licensing costs go up, and I don't have a number for, our book budget, like our actuals for the book budget at this time of year, so, I can look at that and compare it to how much time we have left and think about that for next year.
Sure, thank you. And one last question, and this is more requested information perhaps in, for our next, meeting on November 14th, our working meeting. You had mentioned in your, opening remarks about how libraries are often kind of tapped on to provide some of that rural, service. And I believe that, that the library is one of the community hubs that have been identified,
Yeah.
right? So are you, it's kind of a twofold question, are you using those counts for your patron, like, you know, people in the door, counts, and could you provide for council a look at the patron? You know, I see in your reporting, right, the use of resources, the volunteer hours, the number of patrons, as well as the number of carded members.
Yeah.
Maybe just the year over year total, for our meeting in time for November 14th.
Yes, so do you mean, sort of walk-ins and library users, who are coming in because of those or
Just totals.
Yes, okay,
And yeah, and if you are including those community hub
right.
visitors, users
Right.
as part of those totals, or separate. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking very exactly what you
So like a
provide
number,
for your CEO report.
Yeah.
In your monthly meetings that kind of outlines how many e-resources and physical resources and,
Yes.
you know, patrons, because not everybody who uses the library are necessarily carded members, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions before Maggie leaves us? Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now on to Public Works.
We can wait for 2 minutes here.
I'm hearing that we need to take a quick 2-minute break, if we could. We'll take a
That's all
pause,
right.
yeah, absolutely. Will be 11:25, 3-minute break, there you go, any markets that go.
Yeah, no, they did a great job.
Let's get back, shall we? We've got 2 more presentations. We're trying to wrap by noon. Sharp hour of.
I think today, if we are a little bit over, just for the sake of,
Not
we
really.
have another meeting, okay?
No.
So I guess we'll,
Is Harold in this meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, at 12:30. You're right, yeah. All right, sorry.
yeah, so I guess Chuck and Jake will just be to the point a little bit, so maybe,
Just like, one of the
you know,
big
without-
ones, it's like,
without
let's
rushing
speed
it,
through
but,
this one, Jake.
They're good together.
yeah, I guess maybe just advice to them, they can take it if they want, but maybe just on the responsibilities, just to keep that a little more brief. With that, I'll hand it over to Jake.
So what's yours, Jake?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. You get to the next slide. The Public Works Department oversees and facilitates maintenance and capital activities for 520 lane kilometers of roadways, bridges, and culverts. This network consists of approximately 151 kilometers of gravel, 107 kilometers of surface treated, and 7 kilometers of hot mix asphalt roads. The department also is responsible for the township's gravel resources, transfer station, curbside waste collection, contract, and closed landfill sites. There is quite an extensive list of functions the department looks after, including regular maintenance of the municipal road system and all that comes along with that. I won't get into that, dive into those items too deeply, just for the sake of time, but they are listed there for you to review. If we can get to the next slide. I think the following one as well, so we'll just skip to the 2023 accomplishments. Enhancements to the public works fleet included the replacement of our rubber tired excavator, including the brush head. We are, it is currently in the, at the dealer's yard. We're awaiting the installation of the brush head right now, and we currently have ours. It's not holding us up or nothing. We have ours, it's working fine, and they estimate they're expected to have it at the end of October, or delivered to us at the end of October. But I don't see that happening, as they still haven't received the brush head. So we've also introduced a tractor mounted snow blower on the Parks and Rec tractor to be used to help with our winter operations and improve the overall operational efficiency. We've replaced 2 water pumps that are installed on our water trucks to help with dust control and in the grading process. 2023 brought some significant activity and developments in the road construction and maintenance, including the application of approximately 2.4 kilometers of single surface treatment, 7 kilometers of double surface treatment. If council recalls from last year, we had to delay approximately 5 kilometers of surface treatment just in the year, just got too far into the year and into the fall, the weather changed, and it was decided to delay that. That was completed early this year. We have also applied approximately or nearly 56 kilometers of gravel resurfacing to our roads. We've accomplished 22 kilometers of roadside brushing and cleared 12 kilometers of ditches. Some of the major projects completed in 2023 include 2 sections of Division Road, one in the Donwood area and one between the 3rd and the 5th line of Douro. We've also completed reconstruction on Douro 7th line, south of County Road 4, the 4th line, south Dummer, between Clifford Road and Douglas Road, and a small section of Center Dummer Road, which all received surface treatment. Next slide. So on our operation side of things, we have stayed pretty much status quo. The cost, the changes that you see reflect the actual cost of increases. One is the and kind of under contracted services, the cost of licensing is just increased. Our fuel, we've increased the fuel due to increased fuel prices. Our materials and supplies, it's the anticipated increase in materials from year to year. Our professional development, we've just had a closer look at our staffing levels and what we expect our actual training needs for the staff to be, and we've been able to reduce that a little bit for in relation to the training. I think that's it for the most part. Paul spoke to the gravel pit licensing change, and yeah, if we can get to the next slide. So our brushing was previously budgeted in capital. It's now being budgeted into operating, as it reflects more of a maintenance activity as opposed to capital. However, we're still planning, there will still be planned brushing projects for the upcoming year to ensure that the brushing is completed regularly on each road. There is also an allocation to allow roads that are deemed need brushing throughout the year in their operational budget. There is a list there of some of the more, some of the major roads that are going to, or major brushing activities that are going to happen on the roads in 2024 that we've proposed. Next slide. So in our capital projects for 2024, we're proposing the addition of a new brushing unit to help manage the ongoing roadside brushing. This unit will give us the ability to maintain our brushing along our roadsides, as opposed to the current machine that we have is more of a heavy duty, robust machine that is to do the initial heavy duty hard work in the brushing part. This is to come along in the future years to help maintain that. It'll brush the smaller stuff, not so much the bigger stuff. So once we get a good jump on our brushing, which we're making steps towards that, this unit will help maintain that throughout the coming years. It also has a 25 foot extendable arm on it, which we can reach in behind guardrails, signs, etc., which currently we can't do. That's under our large machine. We have Intercom Drive, some slope stability works there. This pertains to the stabilization of the slope on the vacant lot that we filled there over the years. The slope has become dangerous, and we need to rectify that. That will be done by moving some of the materials on site from the slope to reduce the slope to the south side of the property on Intercom line or Intercom Drive, be on the north side, back side of the Douro Arena on the north slope. If you're looking to the north from the arena, is where some of that material would be moved. Not all of it, it's just some to reduce the slope. The realignment of the 12th line of Dummer. This was a project that started a few years ago. Previous council had approved this. The project was previous agreement with Drain Brothers to realign the roadway. removing, currently there's a sharp S bend there with a steep hill that is quite unsafe. This also benefits drains a little bit. They can access the east side of their pit now by removing that road from there and going straight through to connect after the current S bend. So it, as I said, this was a previous project. It's just now coming to light. They're doing some works inside their property, and next year we believe this project will be completed at some point next year. We also have a snowplow truck on here for replacement. This is a 2010 truck. They are on a 10-year life cycle. This is now, we do look at this annually. We don't replace them just because it's 10 years. You know, it's reached 10 years. We do try to extend that if we can. As you can see, this is 2010, so it's 14 years now. It is due for replacement. With the replacement, it will transition into the spare truck. The current spare truck will then be surplus and liquidated after this process takes place. Next slide. So this is some of our capital projects that we've proposed for next year. I'll just run through some of the larger ones for the sake of time. On the gravel side of things, the fourth line says Dummer. This is from County of Road 8 to the south. Will receive gravel. It also is going to have some ditching completed on as well. There's a fairly large hill on that road that's erodes annually, and we need to rectify that, as well as some other spots down throughout the road that will receive ditching. The seventh line of North Dummer, from Center Dummer to the north, I believe probably some of council have heard about this, have received complaints about this in the past. It's a safety issue. It is a dead end road. However, it is a safety issue for residents as well as our staff for completing our winter maintenance and any maintenance we have to do on it. It will receive some extensive works, gravel, ditching, brushing, to rectify those safety concerns. The Douro second line from Cedar Cross to County Road 4 will receive gravel and some minor ditching. The fifth line, North Dummer, County Road 6 to the north, will receive ditching, gravel, and brushing. Hickey Road, this is a culvert on Hickey Road, just south of County Road 32. During our 2022 structure inspections, deficiencies were identified, and this is to rectify those deficiencies, including patching the current culvert barrel and installing new guardrails and posts and with end treatments. The sixth line of North Dummer from County Road 6 to the north, or to the south, sorry, will receive some brushing and ditching. That's into our fire hall is on that the sixth line road. Third line road, North Dummer, again, will receive some brushing, ditching, and gravel. When we look at the surface treatment, our very large project is the fourth line road, North Dummer from Sawmill to County Road 6. It's in some rough shape. It's going to be pulverized, ditched, culverts will be replaced, gravel application, and then with the final surface treatment to complete the project. We have the two sections of Birchview Road on here for a single surface treatment. We will be doing some patching in some of the areas that are broken up with some asphalt. We'll put a thin layer of asphalt over top of that to help secure the surface treatment when it's put on. Dummer Asphodel Road, we have a joint project with Norwood to Asphodel. Will be half the cost of this. This is the full cost is 140. We'll be looking at 70,000 for our cost to complete a single application of surface treatment. Next slide. I think that's it for me, actually. Yeah, so there's lots going on in the Public Works Department. That's kind of a brief overview, but if there's any questions, then I'm happy to try to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Councilor Johnson and
Yeah,
Councilor.
that income, road there, you say you gotta cut the bank back on that?
Yeah, so it was identified, that the slope on the empty lot or the vacant lot to the east of Indicon Drive, the slope is eroding and it's quite a steep slope at the current time, so.
So is that what the weather, or whoever said that we put too much fill in? So is this what this is what?
That's in relation to that, yes.
This is-
Yeah, it's to rectify the work.
So we can move that fill, move it around
Yeah,
different area?
the plan is to move it to, and Orca is okay with that. We have to still apply for an Orca permit to do the works, but we will do that after budget has been approved. They have agreed with the plan that we have to move it to the west, southwest of the property, and, yeah, so once we remove some of that material, it will lessen the slope and, reduce the.
Well, like, so we just want to take it off the top, are we? Like
Yeah,
the
it'll have to be
slope,
dropped, and then the slope will actually be,
Cause it drops down 30, 40 feet or something.
yeah.
Yeah,
Councilor
sure.
Johnson. Are you done, Councilor Johnson?
On that question, now when you get this other, head, so now we'll have the two heads, so you kind of spell it out, but one doing the finer stuff and the other one going and doing the bigger rough stuff, eh? So we were, our ideas, so we don't use chainsaws now, Tom?
Oh, yes, this is, through, Madam Mayor, this is still, it won't cut a tree down, this is not,
So it's just still.
we still have to manually cut the tree down, this is just for, our machine can run up to, you know, a soft wood, it could probably cut a 6-inch, maybe an 8-inch tree. When you get into hardwood, it's limited at, you know, 4 to 6 inches, max. So this machine or unit would actually go on our loader. It's a self-contained, diesel engine, operated, so it just quick attaches to the front of the loader. And we can run out to the various locations and do what needs to be done. So we could actually use both machines at the same time on, you know, various roads.
Now, would they be good for some of the corners, some of the intersections?
Yeah,
Because we always have a problem with intersections, you know, when cars have to keep moving up further and further. So I think that's one area that we really need someone to go around and check the intersection. Like there's, you know, that's one of the complaints that I hear all the time is that, you know, like they're right on the highway before they can directly see around the corner.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that, those question machines would help a lot with that, eh?
That's, yeah, that's what with the reach on this, and it can cut, with the head that we're gonna be proposing is, it can cut, you know, grass, cattails, all that stuff out of the corners so that we can get a nice line of sight there, safe line of sight.
Thanks.
Councilor Watt, Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I've got 2 or 3 things here, Jake. We'll start with 7 Douro-Dummer off of Center. And I know I've had calls on it and I've talked to you, but so we got the hill. Is that gonna be kind of addressed while you're doing the job? Because I know we've had trouble there, some along the line with a tow truck even going over on its side or whatever, because it is a dangerous spot there. And there was talk years ago, from what I was told, about cutting that hill down some to make it a little bit safer. So is that kind of on the whole scope of the project to do the 7 line?
Yes, that's in the plan. We're going to try to cut that hill, fill the road and use that material in a different section of the road to fill low spots and yeah, make the road overall safer. If you travel the road, the trees are right there on the side of the road. There's no room. It's, yeah, it'll, like I say, it'll see some extensive work and hopefully be, safer and when it's all finished.
All right, thank you. Next, the fourth line and Center-Dummer Road, one thing that was accomplished in 23. Was that surface treatment? I'm sorry, I haven't been down that road in
Yes.
quite a while, so the surface treatment went up just past where Fred Darling and Bradnam.
It actually goes just south of Clifford Road. So
Right, yeah, but I mean Center Road, because Center Road, did it get a
Oh, Center-Dummer.
Center-Dummer?
Center-Dummer Road, sorry,
Center-Dummer.
yes.
It got that little short.
It's up just past, it's approximately 800 meters from fourth line. So yeah, just up to the top of that
Up
hill.
the top of that hill, perfect. And my last one, if I may, please, Bursby Road, and I know it came up at our last council meeting with the BPOA giving us the presentation and so on. With the work that's going on with Bell, what they're going to do and stuff like that, is that going to affect what you do, or is that something you're coordinating with them, or is that even a problem for you, what they're going to do compared to us, service trading? Like, I don't want them to come in and start rooting out what you do.
No, it won't cause anything, any issue with what we're doing. As far as we've been understood or been told, all that works is going to be underground. It'll be drilled and bored. It won't be overhead.
All right, that's fine. No, I just don't want them going in and digging up what, you know, what you spend the money on, and then they're going to put in mines or fiber optic, whatever they're having to do. I don't even know what exactly they're doing, but as long as it doesn't rip up what you're accomplishing.
No, we don't want that.
No, all right, that's good, thank you.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks a lot, Jake, for all the hard work that you put into this. I just have a couple of questions and maybe a couple of comments. Income drive, is that going to include, I know before there was a plan to put a road heading to the east off of Intercom down at the bottom. Does that include that plan for to put a road there for to get to, I think that the plan was to get 2 lots?
No, perhaps Alana will speak to that.
Okay, sorry.
Through Mayor Watson, the deputy mayor, it's, with the way that that slope is and the testing and the studies that have been done, there is substantial stability requirements for there to be any development on that property. So from the numbers that we've received currently, and you see in the budget, just to become compliant with ORCA is what we're looking at there, but to actually stabilize that slope to the point that we can have development would be an additional cost. And I'm not sure from the township's perspective if it would be worth us investing based on the value of those lots. So once we get this completed, we can take a look at it again, take a look at the costs. Certainly some properties and value of land has increased, but not necessarily on the industrial side of things. So at this point, we don't have a plan to continue to move forward with those 2 lots. Until we can ensure that it is stable enough for development, and that was in discussions with ORCA. They had asked us to actually continue and do all of that work, and we just said, we just want to be compliant. The investment from the municipal side is probably more than we want to undertake.
Okay, thank you. Jake, the brushing unit, I think it's a great thing, much needed. It's been something and I agree wholeheartedly with you on what that will actually do for the maintenance of the municipality and keep that brush at bay. I was actually fortunate enough, just for council's information, I was actually fortunate enough to go and see one of the same units that you're looking at. And that municipality actually Sheila went with me at the time. And that municipality had bought that 10 years prior and had been running that same machine. And he spent an hour trying to find a tree big enough that he could actually demonstrate on it. And it's just like cutting grass. The more you cut, the less that brush comes, and the more you can stay on it, it's future cost for the municipality that it cuts down. So anyways, I just want to just put that forward. And truck replacement. I thought we were needing, was it 2 trucks that I thought last year it was going to be 2 trucks this year? Just a question.
We did have 2 trucks, but to help with the budget this year, we did take one out to We felt we could leave them in there, but we felt that one of them would have to go eventually, so we chose to just bring one forward this year.
All right, thanks very much.
Councillor Johnson.
I got one more. Where, through the chair, where are we getting our gravel?
From our 6-line gravel pit.
Okay, so that's what all this proposed, that's what we'll be doing.
Yeah, we'll have, we should have one more year of crushing at the 6-line, and then we are in discussions with, for our future resources.
Councillor Report.
Through you, Mayor Watson, fuel is the one item that impacts absolutely every budget on here, and we see an increase in fuel costs. You know, it's hard to predict exactly where fuel costs are going. They've been all over the map. And kind of a broader question on that is, have there been some provisions made in here for future carbon tax increases? Because that will be significant.
Through you, Madam Mayor, at this point, no. Yeah.
We're good. It looks like carbon tax is here at least until the next federal election, so it might not hurt to throw in an extra couple percent just to compensate for that. Just kind of in my day job, speaking with a few clients in the agricultural sector, the carbon tax on grain drying, for example, has increased that cost by over 7% just with carbon tax. So.
Okay, any other questions from council on this? I do have a couple of quick questions. So looking at the plow truck, sorry, I've got my pages turned around now. You said that the current spare truck would be designated as surplus and subsequently liquidated. So is the $360,000 that's listed here, is that net of that, or are?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Is the $360,000 net of the spare truck that will be subsequently liquidated? Are you already ballparking the number in there?
Yes, we have estimated the trade-in.
Okay, so there's nothing that will be added back in beyond what we're seeing right now?
I mean, we'll have to see when we go back and actually tender and based on some of the vehicle prices, but Jake has gone and gotten some quotes in current pricing. And that pricing does include the trade-in.
Thank you. Just a question, just from an administrative standpoint, under surface treatment, we were already talking about Birchview Road and the works there. Is there a reason why they're blocked out as two separate lines in the budget? Like it's all Birchview, like why are we doing from McCracken's to Camp Line and Camp Line to 28? Because it'd be nice just to see quick math, it's like $370,000, but I only say that in context of your explaining that Sawmill Road, the 4th line Douro-Dummer is the largest project, but when you use the dollars and cents, it looks like Birchview's the largest. So I just want to get some context on that.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Birchview Road, we have our roads in sections, broken into sections, and Birchview Road is in 2 sections. So that's how it's allocated to those sections, the cost. So that's why it's broke out into 2 separate sections, more or less. Birchview Road is 12 kilometers long, as opposed to the 4th line of Dummer being approximately 3, maybe 3.5. So Birchview Road is close to the 4th line's overall cost, but it is a 12-kilometer road, so it does add up. So to answer your question, the reason why they're split up like that is because it's in 2 sections in our system, and that's how we allocate the cost to them.
Sure. Just like I said, I'm sure it's just purely administrative, but to clarify, we are literally doing end-to-end on Birchview Road. There's not a piece of Birchview Road that's being missed.
Correct.
And that total bill is roughly $370,000.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on Public Works? Seeing nothing, so we have a decision to make, council. It's 12 o'clock now. We have our fire chief queued up to make a presentation today. We could defer that to tomorrow. And I know that there is another meeting that some of us need to attend for 12:30. Councilor Report, Councilor Watt, sorry.
Mayor Watson, I'd like to make a motion that we delay fire services presentation tomorrow because it is a pretty significant line item in the budget.
Okay.
Just interesting.
Councilor Watt?
And that's what, like, my question was just kind of be to check, like, what kind of timeframe does he think he might take up here, or, you know, with questions, so again, is the meeting you're having going to be here, like, that you already have to travel?
Yes and no, in terms of the meeting. It could be here, it could also be a hybrid situation.
But I mean, if you guys have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm off, you know, we can just see what Chuck thinks of, because he may have something on tomorrow too, that he can't do.
I can be available if that's easier for everybody. I can do something quickly. It'll depend on the engagement and the questions. But I'm also available to start off tomorrow if that's easier for council.
I'm going to make a judgment call, knowing what the next meeting is and where we're at for time, and looking at fire services, that chief, sorry to defer to you, but I think it would make most sense if we defer it.
Okay, that's fine.
And start tomorrow with that, given the multiple pieces, the technical pieces to it. Okay. Madam Clerk? Sorry, there is a motion. Do we need to move that? Yes?
You made a motion, right?
Yes. Okay, sure.
I'll second it.
So we have Councilor Verboten, and it was seconded by Councilor Watt. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so, and thank you, Chief, for your flexibility in that. I appreciate it.
Do we have you did say, Paul, it was less tomorrow, so 2 o'clock still, good enough to start, and we're not gonna run.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think I probably underestimated the amount of time that my section at the front end was gonna take, and I was probably only thinking about the departments and also some of the questions that probably didn't account for. But I think it's all good, healthy, conversation and questions. So, yeah, to answer the question, yes, there will be time tomorrow.
At 2 o'clock still, okay.
Because I won't be doing all the whole intro section.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Yes, and it is for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We have county council tomorrow as well, so for us to get from here to there, to give us space, we need to, I don't think we can start much before 2, right? Councilor Verboten?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Motion to adjourn.
I will take that motion. Anyone want to second that motion? Deputy Mayor Nelson, before I call for the vote, just a reminder, so we are tomorrow at 2. And if you haven't already been jotting down your questions on the parts of the budget that have been presented thus far, just as a reminder to get them before our working session, which is going to be on November 14th at 10 o'clock. And with that, motion to adjourn has been moved. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you.